Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us for the next installment of the Preemie Parent Alliance and Family Advocacy Network's webinar series. We are so happy to have you with us. My name is Kira Sorrells. I am the founder and president of the Preemie Parent Alliance, which is a network of organizations from around the country, each providing much needed support to families who are in the NICU, those who have graduated from the NICU, and those who have lost babies. Each of these stellar organizations has been founded by or is run by a parent leader who has had a NICU experience or lost themselves, and they are completely committed to representing the interests of NICU families in all facets of healthcare policy, care guidelines, advocacy, education, and family support. And I am delighted to be here today alongside my colleagues Crystal Grogan, who works here with me at PPA, and with Erica Goyer, who is the co-chair for the National Perinatal Association's Family Advocacy Network, also known as FAN. FAN champions collaborative relationships between families and the medical professionals who care for them. They do such a wonderful job by bringing together family advocates from every arena of maternal infant care to share their ideas and cultivate their talents so that we can collectively address the medical, educational, and psychosocial needs of families. And it really is this commitment to families and collaboration that brought PPA and FAN together. And these really are our guiding principles for this collaborative webinar series. Well, we are just delighted and just so happy to be able to bring this special webinar in recognition of Parents of Preemies Day, which we just celebrated on Sunday, Bereaved Mother's Day, which was also acknowledged on Sunday, and of course, upcoming this Sunday, Mother's Day. So today, you'll have the pleasure of hearing from 4 mothers who were deeply affected by their experiences with preterm birth and loss, and they took those experiences and channeled them through writing. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping things to go over. This webinar is being recorded, so if you have to leave at any point or wish to listen again, we will be providing a link to that recording in a follow-up email that will be coming to your inbox. Also, as an attendee, you have the ability to ask questions in the chat box, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. Erica and Crystal will be monitoring the questions in the chat box, so please use that feature. And if you have any technical issues during the webinar, feel free to use that chat feature as well. So before we begin, I'd like to know who we have here with us. So if you would just be so kind as to answer this poll, it will just give us a little bit of an idea of who's with us. I'll leave that up for just a little bit. All right, great. Well, it looks like we've got about half of the people joining us provide in-hospital parent support, and the other half are community-based parent support organizations. So thank you so much for being here with us. So I'd also like to welcome our panelists. Like I said before, they have taken their life experience and transformed it into something that provides hope, encouragement, and healing for many NICU families and their children. Here with us today, we have Deb DeSenza, who is the founder of Preemie World and co-author of the Preemie Parents Survival Guide to the NICU. Jennifer Driscoll is also here with us. Jennifer is the founder of Lily's Hope and the author of a children's book by the same name, Lily's Hope, A Preemie's Journey of Hope. Janae Johns is here. She's an advocate and author of Once Upon a Preemie. and Stacy Porter, who is the founder of the Tangerine Owl Project and a contributing writer for the book Our Only Time. Now, I've known each of these panelists through our work together in the Preemie Parent Alliance, and they all have something in common beyond their experiences with prematurity and loss. And that is that every single one of these mothers has a tremendous depth of passion for helping families heal. So we're going to start with you, Deb. I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about your NICU experience and what was that turning point for you when you decided to start Preemie World and then to write the survival guide?
Thank you, Kira. So I'm Deb DeSenza, and I had my daughter Becky in 2003. She was born at 30 weeks, and she was 2 pounds, 15 and a half ounces. She spent 38 days in the NICU and came home on medical equipment, on an apnea monitor and on oxygen. For a 30-weeker, she was pretty strong out of the gate, but we did have a pretty rocky NICU stay regardless. We struggled with Becky having 3 heart defects. She had a number of breathing issues. Although she was never on a ventilator, she was a CPAP baby. And we had lingering jaundice that caused a lot of problems. And she had a pretty bad case of sepsis, almost took her out. She had severe reflux, and that was one of the many reasons she had a major feeding issue until 12 years old. At the time in the NICU, we were told that she had a clear cranial ultrasound, but due to the CP diagnosis at 13 and a half years old and the consistent diagnosis of scoliosis, we now know that something was unfortunately missed. The book itself came about because I had Becky at 10 minutes to midnight on a weekend, on a Saturday night. And there was apparently a welcome packet, so I was told. We never got it. In any case, we felt like we actually lived the welcome packet because we bumbled our way through everything. It was a pretty rocky stay. So my co-founder, Nicole Kahn, and my co-author, she is known for her documentary of her son's stay in the NICU called Little Man. It was on Showtime and Netflix. She had her son Nicholas at 26 weeks at 1 pound. Our experiences were vastly different, but we both felt that more education was needed, and it was different than just a medical level. That was more importantly on a human level and parent level. In the book, we provide them with everything, the audience with everything in terms of information on the various medical terms to resources and things like that, but we also sprinkle our stories throughout it. We talk about the exact subject that we're highlighting. We actually sprinkle our story throughout it, and we talk about what we went through. Makes it feel like we're right there with them. Our book is actually full of color. We made it very colorful because it's supporting parents from around the world of every form, every race, every emotion, and we wanted to color the book that way. There are a lot of great books on this subject out there, so ours is just one more book. I'm really impressed by all of them that are out there. We just wanted to do something different. We really wanted to speak to parents on a very human level and a very honest level. We wanted them to feel supported, not alone. And this is the book that we would have wanted in the NICU. Thank you.
And Deb, what year was the book published?
Oh boy, 2008.
Do you remember about how 2008? So I remember when I read it, I was not that long out of the NICU, and I remember because my children were discharged towards the end of 2007, and I remember reading that and thinking, wow, I wish that I had this, a year ago. And
So do I.
And I love, yeah, right. And so I guess that really is kind of, was that your turning point when you met Nicole and you guys decided, we have these different experiences, because her son was a micro preemie, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And then you having Becky a little bit later in gestation, but there are some basic needs and emotions that we all experience as parents,
Right.
wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for us, it really was, the turning point was really, we looked at everything that was already out there and we saw a definite need. We saw a chance to do something very different, and it's been received quite well. So I feel like we did right.
Yeah, I remember thinking it's wonderful. So one book that we were given when we were in the NICU, I mean, I couldn't even look at it because it was almost arranged like a textbook, and there was almost too much information that just was going to freak me out. it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
it wasn't
understand.
providing that kind of, yeah, it wasn't that personal touch that I think your survival guide really brought to the table. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to move on to Jennifer Driscoll and Janae. Now, these two ladies kind of look at prematurity from a slightly different lens because they wrote children's books. Let me start with you, Jen. Can you tell us a little bit about your NICU experience and how did that become a book?
Sure. Thanks, Kira. Our book is a little bit different because it came after our foundation was started. Both of our children were born prematurely. Lillian Hope was born 7 weeks early, so she's a 33-weeker, 2 pounds, 12 ounces, and 15 inches long. So small for her gestational age. But then we also had our son Aiden was born prematurely as well. He was born only 4 weeks early, but 4 pounds, 11 ounces. Lily, we kind of call her our like main preemie because she just had so many more struggles in the NICU than Aiden did. Her struggles were she was on a ventilator, an oscillator, she had a chest tube inserted, she had brain bleeds, she had a lot of issues at birth. And we waited impatiently the 8 days before we were able to finally hold her when she took herself off the ventilator. But, you know, she had a rocky stay also, but really, she only stayed in for 24 days, came home on an apnea monitor as well, and long-term had gastrointestinal surgery, physical therapy, speech therapy, as well as feeding therapy. And Aiden, long-term also had physical therapy, speech therapy, also has some lung issues now at age 4, and also had RSV, which kind of contributed to some of that at a young age, only 4 months old. So definitely had their complications. And really that's where Justin, my husband, and Justin and I saw the need to support families like us in the NICU. A neighbor across the street had given us some paper products when we were going back and forth to the hospital with Lily. And that is really where the idea for the foundation came from. We applied for our 501c3 and got it in 2013, but didn't get started until 2014 because that was the year Aiden was born and we had complications. But our foundation, Lily's Hope Foundation, is an all-volunteer nonprofit that responds to the emergency needs that parents have when they do have a newborn that is born prematurely. And we really try to fill that gap and provide them with items that, as we all know, are expensive and really difficult to obtain in a quick period of time. But our family, our extended families, our aunts and uncles and parents are all very involved with the foundation. And my aunt has said to me, has suggested maybe I should write a book about it. And I immediately thought I had to bring Lily into it because she's the namesake for the foundation. So we started brainstorming. That was in 2015. And in 2016, we wrote the book together, and took us a couple months to get focused and get our storyline together. But our story is about Lily and Aiden's NICU journey, hope, and the role that it plays in their lives. And the story is completely told from Lily's perspective, from being in the NICU herself, and then actually going back in again as a sibling. And then she explains throughout the book how her and Aiden participate in the foundation, and really what her hope is and Aiden's hope are for families with premature babies just like us and what we've gone through in the past.
I think that is absolutely wonderful that you wrote this book with your daughter. Can you tell me a little bit about, what were those brainstorming sessions like, or what were those writing sessions like working on this with your child?
It was really fun. I've never, obviously never written a book before. So the first thing that we did was we all sat in our living room and I said, okay, in 2 minutes, give me everything you can think of when you think of with Lily's Hope Foundation and the NICU. So we came up with a massive list of all the terminology that we could think of. And then we took those big sticky papers and put them all over the walls and came up with a bunch of different storylines and really let them sit on the walls for a couple of weeks before we figured out one storyline that would bring it all together, which was our story of hope and how it kind of tied everything in.
Oh, I love that. And did Aiden have any say in the process?
He did. His favorite thing is really the pictures and what things they were holding more towards the end of the book because he was so small when we started it. But if you look at the cover, they're holding balloons and they're holding Hippo, which is their favorite stuffed animal. So he kind of got to give his own part of it as well.
Oh, that is so sweet. And I would love to hear what was what has the reaction been to this book from other parents? Have you heard from them who have, read it with their children?
Absolutely. Probably the first thing I would say is that we have our niece and nephew were both preemies. They were 28 weekers and they're 2 years old now. And their favorite thing to do is read the book because they get to see Lily and Aiden in the book. But we hear lots of feedback from our families because I think it's a unique book because it's from Lily's perspective, but it's something that they can share with their children. But it's such a strong story of hope that I think it gives everyone a really great satisfaction when they read the book and want more and want to understand, what we've all been through.
Right. I think that is just wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen. And Janae, you are our other children's book author. So could you tell us a little bit about your NICU experience and just how that became the inspiration for your book, Once Upon a Preemie?
Sure, Kiara. So thank you for having me. And my son, Tochi, was born 14 weeks prematurely and came in weighing 1 pound, 15.3 ounces. We had a 77-day stay in the NICU and a very rocky, bumpy, frightening, traumatic roller coaster ride of an experience in the NICU each day that we arrived to parent and nurture and comfort our son. My son was intubated for about a day and a half, and then from there had several forms of oxygen assistance to breathe, feeding tubes. We had a scare with neck during his stay, and overall, we just wanted our firstborn child healthy enough to come home with us. And although the chief of neonatology kept encouraging us that our baby, our very tiny and fragile baby, was one of the strongest babies in the NICU at that time, we couldn't quite comprehend that because we just kept saying, well, if he's the strongest baby in this NICU, why can't he come home with us? And of course, my son would be born in one of the worst winter stormy months that Philadelphia experienced in history. And so not only did we have the traumatic experience of having to nurture and parent our firstborn baby in the hospital for his first 3 months of life, we literally had to weather the storms to get to the NICU to be by his side.
Oh my goodness.
And so when we arrived there every day, because we would literally pack a bag and just be prepared to stay from, say, 6 a.m. until midnight, we had so much free time on our hands, especially when our son was firstborn. Because he was so fragile, we were not able to kangaroo with him. We could hold his hand through the isolette, but we couldn't bring him out for a few days. And so the nurses encouraged us to read to our son, bring books, bring poems, bring children's books, so that he can hear and become more familiar and comfortable with our voices, and to help soothe him and help him out as a supplement to all the medication that he was receiving, if you will. And so we put a call out to all of our family and friends and said, hey, we know you can't get here every day after work, but what you can do to help us is give us books. Let us borrow books from your child's library so that we can read to Tochi. And about 2 weeks into his NICU stay, he had a mini library next to his bed. We were also told that research indicates that reading helps stimulate healthy brain growth and development in all babies, in all infants and children. However, this was especially powerful in preemie babies, and we had a micro preemie. And I'm all for education, so I said, well, bud, you're going to get started with your level of reading and listening to reading early on in life. We were also told that reading helps stimulate and foster and nurture the bonding experience. And so this was very precious and delicate for us, especially on those days when we were unable to kangaroo with him. And so once Tochi was discharged from the NICU, about a month after coming home from the NICU, I wanted to give back to the preemie community. I wanted to give back to the NICU that helped us bring our son home. And I wanted to do something that would be meaningful and supportive and encouraging of many NICU families, not just the families in the hospital that our son was born. And so what started off as a poem titled "You Are So Very Special" became Once Upon a Preemie 2 years later. Once Upon a Preemie is a children's book written to motivate, comfort, and inspire preemie parents, filled with spiritual messages of love, faith, and hope, which I believe are the key and essential ingredients to help nurture a preemie baby home. And the book is told in the voice of a parent speaking to the child in the NICU. The book is also very colorfully illustrated and uses the analogy of a seedling growing and weathering life storms until it's big and healthy enough to be plucked to be delivered to someone's home.
Well, that is just beautiful, Janae. And I love what you said about reading and how important that is for the bonding experience and for the development of the babies. And what a great way for your friends and family to support you by sending you books. And, I think that oftentimes friends and family, they want to help, but they don't know how to help. And parents are often just, unable to even voice how they need help. And so having, tools like that just to say, you know what, send us books. I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful way to help, support the families.
Absolutely. And the beauty of those books were that they were regular children's books, but now thanks to Deb and everyone on this panel, we have very specific and unique books for preemie parents, because now we have more resources and tools that speak to our unique either introduction to parenthood or our experience as NICU families who don't get the luxury of bringing our babies home when they're first born.
Right, exactly. And tell me, same question that I had for Jen, what has been the response to your book? Have you heard from families who have purchased the book or who have received the book as a gift?
I have. So I do a bit of a roadshow tour when I'm able to with the book, and I get a lot of women who come by my booth and say, I was a preemie, or my granddaughter was a preemie, and they'll read the book before they purchase it. And maybe not every woman, but 1 in every 3 women will read the book and literally cry because it takes them back to their NICU journey and experience. And they're thankful for overcoming that leg of their parenthood journey with their then fragile babies and now healthy grown adult children. Healthy and grown adult children. And I have also had people leave reviews who purchase the book online and just speak to not just the aesthetics or the beauty of the book or the illustrations, but how comforting and how soothing and how encouraging this book is as a bedside companion to help preemie families through this traumatic experience. So it's been a very positive response that we received from Once Upon a Preemie.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful piece that you've provided for families. I'm going to move on now to Stacy. So Stacy, your experience is a little bit different from everybody else on the panel, but there is something that unfortunately is all too common with families who have a preterm baby or a baby in the NICU. Can you tell us a little bit about your daughter and how the opportunity arose to contribute to this book, Our Only Time? Okay, just bear with us. Looks like we might be having a little bit of a technical difficulty at the moment.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Have the audio there?
Awesome.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us, Stacy. No problem. So I don't know if you're able to hear my question, but I'll just restate it, that your experience was a little bit different than the others who have spoken on the panel so far, but it is something that's unfortunately quite common and something that you and I have in common with one another. So can you tell us a little bit about your daughter and how that led to the opportunity to contribute to Our Only Time?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. In 2012, I was pregnant with our third child, and I had 2 picture-perfect pregnancies before that, resulting in live birth, baby boy, and then a baby girl 15 months later. So this third time around, kind of expecting the same thing, but life does not go as planned. So I ended up getting severe preeclampsia with my daughter, and that, about 24 weeks in, I'd gone in for a regular appointment with my OB, and we had found that I was, having some symptoms of preeclampsia, and I had just really attributed it to being at work, being on my feet all day. My ankles were swollen. That was really the only issue that I felt. I just didn't remember it being that early with my other 2, having my ankles swell that early. But of course, my provider was a midwife, and she had seen me through my other 2 pregnancies. She was awesome. Ended up saying, well, let's dig a little deeper. Let me take a look. And from there, I ended up being diagnosed with preeclampsia, and the severity of it had gone from probably started off as mild, and then went to severe within 5 days. And that trek took me from a regular appointment to a admission into my local hospital, and then a transport down to another hospital an hour and a half away from home. And that was because they had seen things go from bad to worse, and they, the providers and medical teams were looking at all of the stats with myself and my baby, and they just weren't, they were getting worse quickly, and they knew how it was going to go. So I ended up delivering my daughter at 25 weeks, and it was actually the day that I got transferred to the hospital. Things just kept declining. She was in the NICU for 27 days, and we had seen a lot of ups and downs, as probably everybody who goes through the NICU had seen. Good days, bad days, many blood transfusions, many little things that would kind of that would come up, and then they would kind of go away. So we were just keeping tabs on her. The neonatologist had actually said if she was actually doing really well, despite all of this stuff. And the neonatologist said if she keeps up with this, another 2 weeks, so we can talk about transferring her back home. And neonatologists do not say that kind of stuff lightly. So we took it as really positive. She was taking my milk, all sorts of, good indicators. And, towards that end of the period, she actually got a hospital-acquired bacterium and passed away. She got Pseudomonas, and it was very, very aggressive of a bacteria. She became septic and ended up passing away. So I did not know how to deal with that. None of my family or friends experienced anything like that I was aware of. We had a really, really great group of support from our family, from the hospital, from our community, everywhere. I would say that our experiences along the whole way was really positive, but I still felt like I didn't have anywhere to go. After that, after losing her, I was left to pick up the pieces. My husband and I had to figure out what the new normal looked like. Our other two kids were at that time 3 and 4. So, dealing with preschoolers and how do we explain this to them that their baby sister can't come home. It was really, really rough. So that was what started the Tangerine Owl Project. My daughter's name was Delilah Evangeline, and she was not a pale pink kind of girl. So Tangerine became the color because she was very vibrant, very just full of life, as many preemies are. And the owl, the symbol of being wise, and her own big eyes, as preemies also have. She was born at 1 pound 5 ounces, so that was kind of the biggest defining feature she had. So the owl reminds me of her as well. But I just, after she passed away, I could not let her story end there. I think the world deserved to know her, at least when I started out. And so I started the Tangerine Owl Project to help families who are navigating infant loss and bereavement and NICU experiences also, although, to be perfectly honest, a lot of my experience and work is just with bereaved parents and what happens after they leave the hospital. So we do peer support. And then as far as the book, that we're all here to talk about today, I was, a few years ago, I was invited to read the author of this book that I contributed on, Our Only Time. Her name is Amy Lands, and she had actually written a book before that called Navigating the Unknown. And it's an immediate guide for parents who are experiencing loss. So she had approached me and asked me to do a read through just to kind of validate what she had written there. And, I loved what she wrote. So when she did her follow-up book, Our Only Time, that submission period, I wanted to be helpful. Our Only Time is a story, or is a collaboration of stories from women who have experienced pregnancy or infant loss, and it's meant to serve health professionals. So by making the points of what we as parents feel professionals should know when dealing with this, we shared our stories, and that's what this book is geared towards. So I was honored to be included as one of the contributing authors, and that's what I'm here to help lend parent voice, as I think the Preemie Parent Alliance is all about. So I'm honored to have that experience.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful that we've got these 4 very unique, different books, and they're all for different audiences too, with this one being for providers, others for children, others for parents. I think it's just wonderful. And I've got a few more questions for all of our panelists. There was an article that was published several years ago in the British Journal General Practice, and the article suggested that writing may facilitate cognitive processing of traumatic memories and maybe one way that writing helps us heal from trauma. So I would love for each of you to comment on that in terms of the experience of the writing. Did you find it healing, and if so, how? So we'll start with Deb and have you answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Kira. Well, as a writer, that is my background, my educational background. I've always found it quite healing to write about any topic. It's usually a very personal topic for me that it makes a big difference. So I, probably a year and a half after Becky was born, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and PTSD, mainly because I was the one that said something wasn't right. I was the one speaking up about it. And so I reached out and got help, thankfully. But really, the book followed many years later. And I found as I wrote the book that there were a lot of memories coming back, things that I had maybe, put away in a different corner of my brain, things that I hadn't quite processed yet. And I found that I was processing some of those things at that point by writing about it. So that helped a lot. I definitely can look back as I was writing the book, I found myself working through the whole journey through the NICU as one journey, and not just this tough moment or this small moment of celebration or whatever. It was a whole story, and it was and seeing my path as a mom, because I was a first-time mom and it was my only time becoming a mother, that I was able to process this in a specific path, in as my becoming resilient and my gaining the ability to advocate for my daughter, because I was very nervous. I was terrified to touch her. I was terrified to change her diaper. I really was that nervous mom. So it made a big difference.
Thank you, Deb. And what about you, Jen?
I definitely agree. I would say the process was very emotional because for our book, we ended up by supplying photos of the kids and our life to our illustrator. And that's what she used as a basis for the pictures. So it was really emotional to dig up some of the photos. But then you saw the other side, because even after their health issues at birth and things that happened to them as they got older, it was eye-opening to see how grateful we were and are for what we have been given. But it was also healing, because it was healing. It was eye-opening. I've seen the NICU as a mom. I've seen the NICU just a couple of years ago, like I mentioned, as an aunt. But then I got to see it from a totally different perspective, which is through Lily's eyes as a sibling and being there for herself, which was really incredible. And things as we worked through the book, we were able to actually take some of the lessons that we learned and enhance the way we provide support to our families, and even especially the sibling packages that we provide. So this has really been a truly amazing experience.
That is wonderful. And, with Lily having had that experience, not only as a preemie herself, but also as a sibling, I imagine, were there questions, or do you feel like there were some things that she didn't understand that now she maybe understands a little bit better?
I think so, because, when Aiden was born, she was 6. And when we kind of got into the real writing process, it was only about a year and a half ago. So she's going to be 11 soon. And I think as she kind of got older and realized it, and then also saw it, with her cousins, it definitely, she was absolutely asking lots of questions. What does this mean? What is a ventilator? What is an oscillator? What is the purpose? And more questions. And I think for her and Aiden, but really for Lily, it's kind of given her a new passion and drive for the foundation and a bigger understanding about why we do what we do.
That's fantastic. And what about you, Janae? Was writing Once Upon a Preemie, was that a healing experience for you, or part of your healing journey?
Thank you, Kiera. I absolutely agree with Deb and Jen. Writing Once Upon a Preemie was extremely healing and therapeutic for me, because I didn't know that I needed some help after we were discharged from the NICU, and I didn't seek any. All I know is that our son was finally home. Like, we begged the hospital staff and we begged God to bring our son home. And we were finally in a quiet space. No NICU, no sounds of the NICU, if you will. Maybe a few alarms to remind us to feed him and or administer medication, but it was certainly not the busyness and the loud sounds accompanying the NICU. And so writing became my best friend. And as I mentioned earlier, about a month after we brought our son home, I started journaling daily because I needed time to process the medical trauma that we just experienced, the emotional roller coaster ride of being in the NICU, and the celebration of the milestones. I mean, each pound gained, each ounce of milk he was able to retain, everything. I hadn't journaled throughout the NICU time, but when we came home, I finally had the mental and emotional capacity to do so. And as I mentioned earlier, I wrote all sorts of things. I just wrote notes. I wrote poems. The way in which I was, I guess, processing everything that happened was through trying to remember each thing that happened as it occurred chronologically, until I finally got to a place of just wanting to express to my son what I felt about our experience. And that was a poem that I dedicated to him, called "You Are So Very Special." And so the more I read that one poem in particular to my significant other, he said, "You know, Janae, this is very powerful and you need to do something with it, and also change the title so that people know that it's related to preemie." And so literally, I connected with a publisher and said, "Look, I'm not a writer, I'm not an illustrator, but I want to do something with this. And I think that something is writing a book." And so, again, I think everything that Deb and Jen said is spot on. It's, yes, our contribution to the preemie community and other preemie parents, but it was also a saving grace for me, in a sense, void of having seeking out professional medical help to process that experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Stacy, what about you? What was the experience of writing? Was that I imagine you're going to answer yes, it was healing, but what was that writing process like for you?
It was actually a little bit different for me. I think it was a way to process, for sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think healing to the degree of actually making myself face it a little bit, to be honest. Writing the piece that I wrote was what I chose to write about for this collection was the day that we got the news. Once I had reached the hospital, that was an hour and a half away. The day that I got the news that we were going to have to make a decision on whether or not to deliver her, and knowing how early it was and what the chances of her survival were. So for me, it actually was somewhat enlightening. I think I found healing in writing through blogging, kind of before this opportunity came around. But writing the story down is really, really different than speaking about it. And I've told my story, to audiences of all different types 1.5 million times, and I am super comfortable doing that. But actually sitting there and writing this down and putting myself back into the NICU in my head, right, and putting myself back in the experience, it was actually really hard. It was emotional for me. It was necessary to really let myself feel that pain and that trauma again. So it was kind of both. It was a very bittersweet thing. And I think that sometimes personally speaking, I do a lot better helping other people. So, that's kind of why sharing the story is not as traumatizing for me to go back and talk about, the fact that my daughter is not here anymore. I can say that without bringing tears to my eyes. But writing about that journey is really just cathartic, because it's forcing me to face it again and really work through the processing some more. And it's been 6 years. So, it's not like it just happened, but it surprised me, that it was that hard to write the story, the same story that I tell people,
Right. That's so interesting. And, I think that would be, I think it resonates a lot with me as well, that when you write about it, you really are putting yourself back in that place, which is, I heard Deb talk about that, and Jen talk about that, Janae, when you're writing about that experience and you're having to, share it through that vehicle, it just puts you right back in that moment. And certainly, as we all know, having a baby in the NICU, losing a baby, having a critically ill child is a traumatic experience. And I think it does often surprise even those of us who think that we have healed and recovered, how there could be triggers later on, even years later. So thank you for sharing that. Each of you have really taken your individual missions in your work, whether you have an organization providing direct support to families, if you're an advocate, you're a speaker, a writer, you really, it's all focused on helping families heal this part of them and to find that hope and to realize that they were not alone. So tell me a little bit, I've heard each of you say this in your own way, that this is your way to honor your children, honor your experience, and also help others. Has there been one thing that has stood out to you most in terms of the book aligning with your personal mission? Deb, do you want to start off?
Well, I think for me, it's in sprinkling my story throughout the book. I know that it forced me to be more honest about what happened, and which translated into creating greater honesty in telling the families, this is what this is about. That I didn't sugarcoat things. We did in places we had humor. We had some dark humor in places because that goes with the experience. And but great honesty, as much support as possible, but great honesty and clarity. I think that was key.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say, Jen, in terms of the book and aligning with what you see as your personal mission?
I think what Deb just said is really spot on. I think as we all go through this NICU journey and do outreach to families in the different ways that we do, we ourselves become so transparent. And I think for us, that was the goal with our Lily's Hope children's book, or maybe it became became the goal, or became the result of the book, is to share hope with the families, is share hope with siblings, share hope and help them understand, what it's like, and that there are people out there, reaching out to provide support, just as all of us are together with preemies.
Yeah, because I don't think anyone is going to say, "Oh yeah, the NICU, it's a breeze, don't worry about it." I think it's you all have this message of, what, it's not easy, but you can get through it, and you're not alone. Janae, what would you say as far as your book and aligning with your personal mission to really spread hope to families?
This is a really great question, Kiera, and one that I needed to spend a little bit more time thinking through. But my life mission, outside of being the best mother to my son that I possibly can be, is to see a world free of health disparities one day, and to improve the equitable access to health and healthcare, and what better way to be used as an advocate to use my personal experience, my testimony, and my journey alongside my son going through the NICU to help advocate for the parental support needs, psychosocial needs, and other things that I may not have had in the NICU for other parents and families experiencing this. And so Once Upon a Preemie has given me a new lens and a new voice as a disparities advocate to now shift and focus a lot of my daytime work on the maternity population, which has been an absolute joy and blessing because, again, it's just taking all the trauma that we faced and even some of the great things that have come out of this experience to transfer it to the medical community or healthcare organizations and to support my fellow and peer preemie parent organizations and authors to band arms together, if you will, to be a greater force in this preemie space.
Absolutely. Well, every single one of you is definitely a force in this space, and we are so thankful for that. Stacy, what about you? How is this particular writing that you contributed, how has that really aligned with your overall mission?
Sure. Well, overall, I think one of my biggest missions is focused on maternal mental health and stigma that's associated with loss and, the mental health aspects that come with traumatic birth or bereavement, and just how everything is looked at through society's lens and where we can make a difference there. So, it didn't really stand out to me until I started the Tangerine Owl Project how some providers and some experiences within the NICU and beyond from clinicians, how much of a mark their words and their actions can make. Thankfully, my personal experience was really good from all my support. However, I've spoken with a lot of moms who did not get that same support, and they were told things that were downright harmful. And most likely unintentionally, but I think educating, or putting a face with and a story with a parent as a human being instead of just another parent that they're working with in the NICU, because they are in it day in, day out. And I think sharing our stories in this way and really giving that some depth for our the people, the clinicians and practitioners who are working with these families every day. It's not that they don't feel anything, but some of the stories I've heard, moms who didn't get to hold their child after they passed away because the person said, oh no, you don't want to remember them like that. No, you don't want to see them now, or things that how they were presented with information, or were they presented with information, people making assumptions because they're the medical staff versus really working with the parent to help them experience whatever is going on in the best way possible and the most almost the most healing way possible. These experiences are all really, really hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, if you go home with your baby or not, you're still suffering the trauma of being in the NICU. And so that's really where it's helped me is just being able to share that so that practitioners who can take a step back, I guess, to really see how they're perceived or the words that they're saying and how that might come across, because they don't think like us, right? So what they say may seem perfectly logical, and in regular life it might be, but to a parent going through a trauma, it could come across as something completely unintentional and different. And so drawing to that, I feel like it's helpful to establish better relationships within the NICU, and just all around a better experience for everybody, for practitioners and for parents.
Well, yeah, I think every practitioner that has to work with families, unfortunately, when they go through medical school and nursing school, I don't think they're required to have a second degree in psychology, or clinical therapy, or anything like that. So it's wonderful that we've got the National Perinatal Association and all of their members, and Preemie Parent Alliance and all of our members that are really committed to strengthening that relationship between parents and providers, educating the parents, educating the providers, and really creating a space where communication is helpful and not harmful. So just finally, in our last few minutes, I'm not sure if we've got any questions from our attendees. Crystal, do you know, have we had any questions come through? Okay, I will take that as a no. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Yes, okay. Now I can. Thank you.
I think there are parents who would like to share their stories, but they're intimidated by the idea of writing it down, let alone, publishing it. Maybe they worry that it won't make sense or it won't be, quote, good enough. What would you tell them that might help them feel less intimidated?
Well, let's just go down the line again. Deb, what advice would you give?
I would tell them, tell your story. It is your story. You're the one that knows it best, so nobody can judge you on that. It is your personal story, and it's important. It helps educate other parents. It helps other parents not feel alone. It helps educate the professional sector. There may be some incredible nuggets in there that none of us have ever come up with that you could provide, that could make a big difference to a family in the NICU. So focus on that as opposed to how you think the story comes out and being self-judgmental, because trust me, it's going to help somebody.
Right. What about you, Jen? What would you say?
I would agree. I think some of the things that we've heard today, some of the points I think would resonate on this, that, like Janae had mentioned about journaling and taking those thoughts in that therapeutic way of getting your emotions out and really sorting through your feelings really could turn into something beautiful and be an inspiration for someone else. And at the same time, be so healing for yourself and your family as you go through this experience, or look back at the experience that you've been through. So I think it's wonderful. I think we all, and just look at the four of us here today and how we've had such similar but different experiences, but how we've interpreted our experiences in different ways, and how it's meaningful in its own way to so many people. I would definitely encourage anybody to continue on that path.
Absolutely. And Janae, I was struck by when you said that you had what you had written for your son, and you decided to do something. You wanted to do something with it, so you contacted a publisher. And to me, that's a really bold move. I couldn't imagine doing that myself. So how do you give another parent that kind of confidence to just go for it?
It would be just that key, or go for it, because just as Deb said, your NICU experience and journey is your NICU journey and experience, and it is totally different than anything anyone else in this world experienced. And you know what? I get people who look at me like I have a third eyeball in the middle of my head all the time when I tell them, oh, I wrote a children's book called Once Upon a Preemie. Well, what's a preemie? Well, what's it about? And then they say, okay, that's nice, and walk away. That's okay. This book isn't for the general public. Your story isn't for the general public. Your story is for those precious families and babies who are in the hospital trying to nurture a life. And your story could be the key ingredient or the missing piece of a resource that they're not receiving in the hospital or outside of the hospital when they go home, that they need to heal or to not feel alone. So please don't keep this journey or experience bottled up to yourself. Please share it.
Thank you. And what about you, Stacy? What would you say to a parent who is scared about writing this or scared about sharing it?
I would encourage it a great deal because there's a few reasons. For me, and working with the lost community, it's a mental space that families just you don't get unless you're there. And even though in my head I knew that I was not the only person who went through this, it really doesn't ever feel like that unless you're able to put yourself into someone else's, similarly, put yourself into someone else's experience. So for the amount of times that I've had people approach me or contact me after I've shared my story in any way and say, "Oh my God, listening to you was like me all over in a good way, right? It was them acknowledging that they felt so much better to know that they weren't by themselves." And then, the other reason that I think it's important is because sometimes if you want to help others understand why you felt the way you did or how things came across, when you're talking with the provider end, as we did for this, for our only time, sometimes it can be intimidating to speak with them in person and you can't find the words, and writing it down gives you that chance to really take your time and figure out what's important and to share with them, and to work through that process so that you can enable them to be more I don't want to say better practitioners because that's not the case. I think just more apt to help families deal with this kind of stuff. So, but they don't know they don't know how things were perceived unless you sit down. It's kind of relatable to going through either an autopsy report or some kind of just debrief. It's a way to debrief with the medical team in a way that's less confronting, if that makes sense. So it's twofold,
Sure.
for both groups.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing that sticks out is just the parents saying, "Oh my God, like, wow, I didn't think anyone else was in that same boat. I didn't think anyone else would understand."
Right. I think that's something that resonates with every single book that you read from someone who has had an experience that's even remotely similar. Is just you get that feeling like, oh, wow, really, I'm not alone. And it does validate, your feelings and your experiences. So quickly, just as we close, if you would give us a brief update on where your children are now, and what projects are you working on now? Do you have plans for another book in the future, Deb?
Yeah, so Becky is now 14 years old, almost 15. I can't believe I'm saying that. And she's working through a cerebral palsy diagnosis of scoliosis. A number of years ago, she was diagnosed in kindergarten with autism spectrum disorder, and in second grade, ADHD. She worked through her feeding issues at 12 years old. She's now a foodie instead of a picky eater. It seems like we're on the other extreme. As far as premural goes, I am working on a couple of books, have been doing so, one for following up after the NICU, following up after this NICU book, and one for professionals. I'm also working on a research project as well for outcomes.
That's fantastic. What about you, Jen? What do you have going on? And tell us a little bit about Lily and Aiden.
We have a lot of stuff going on. Lily's Hope Foundation as a whole is growing. We have just moved ourselves into office space this year and out of our home. And we have officially supported just over 1,200 families since we started really helping families in 2014. We remain all volunteer. One day there's a hope that maybe maybe it will be different, but for now, we're accomplishing great things, and that small but mighty is also like the foundation. The kids are doing great. Lily is 10, like I said, 10, almost 11 in July, and she is in select fire on swim team and playing travel soccer. And Aiden just finished up at his fourth T-ball game. He's 4 now, and also, playing soccer. 4.5, he just said. 4.5, playing soccer and doing amazing. And I do have a book coming out this fall, and it's called Preemie Parent Tips to Get You Through the NICU. My book publisher actually suggested it, and it's a culmination of my feedback and things that I found in the NICU. We also reach out to 6 of our Families of Hope from Lily's Hope Foundation and had them provide us with tips. And then we have a few doctors' perspectives as well, and lots of space for journaling and milestone recording, and that will be out this fall.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Thank you, Jen. What about you, Janae? Tell us a little bit about how your son is doing and what your plans are moving forward.
Sure. Tochi is the same dynamic, vibrant baby that he was in the NICU. He is now 4 years old. He loves sports, so he's actively engaged in basketball, soccer, and baseball, sometimes all at the same play date. He is also a lover of music and all things dirt, sticks, rocks, and superheroes. So he keeps us very active and busy inside and outside of our home. He graduated. He recently graduated from the NICU Baby Follow-Up Clinic, which we were very excited about, and he will be starting pre-K this September. And Once Upon a Preemie front, I am in the process of expanding the line of Once Upon a Preemie books. It will be a series of children's books about kangaroo care and discharge, all from the same lighthearted children's book theme or method. And I will continue doing prematurity disparities education and advocacy within the healthcare medical community. And I look forward to engaging in more speaking engagement.
Wonderful. And Stacy, can you tell us a little bit about how your surviving children, how do you as a family kind of remember Delilah, and then tell us what future projects you have as well?
Sure. So my firstborn is turning 11 this year in July, and my daughter's 9. She'll be turning 10 in November. So they're both doing pretty well. And as far as remembering Delilah, we make sure that we acknowledge her existence in as many ways as we feel necessary. So both of them still have, pictures in their rooms of her. We have a picture frame hanging up, just in the family space. And we also spend time, on her birthday and anniversaries, making sure that we're acknowledging her existence. And the fact that, when it comes around to Remembrance Day in October, infant loss and awareness, that we light a candle for her, along with many others who have suffered any kind of loss. But one of the things that the Tangerine Owl Project always does, we do a little kind of pay it forward thing on Delilah's birthday every year. We go and we pay some money at our local Starbucks to just buy a drink for anybody, as long as it'll last, right? One thing just to kind of make their day a little brighter, because that's what she did for us. So that's how we celebrate her. And let's see, next projects. I'm continuing with the one-on-one support of the families who are, suffering loss, but also the Tangerine Owl Project is really going to be focusing on perinatal mental health and, maternal mental health. So I'm actually going to school to get my MSW here, and I start in a few weeks. So I'll be getting my MSW and then, my licensure as an LCSW, and then I hope to really hit up the providers and healthcare systems to make some systems change. But unfortunately, it doesn't feel like they listen unless you're unless you got some credentials behind your name. So that's the new and exciting stuff. And once I get that, it's a very long way to opening a perinatal resource center, and that'll be under the Tangerine Owl Project's name. But it's going to be a while before I get there.
Yeah, well, wonderful, big plans ahead. Well, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Jen, Deb, Janae, Stacy, thank you for sharing your experiences through writing and through this panel today. If you have questions for each of the authors, we'll be posting on Twitter and Facebook through PPA and NPA, all the different ways that you can connect with our panelists today. And just thank you so much to our audience for joining us. If you want to purchase any of those books by our authors, again, just be looking out for that contact information. And just right before we close, we do have just a couple of announcements. The 2018 Preemie Parents Summit will be happening in September, the 28th through the 30th. We will be in Falls Church, Virginia at Inova Children's Hospital, and registration will be opening any day now. We also want to make sure that you're aware of the My NICU network, caring for babies and their families, providing psychosocial support in the NICU. This is the collaboration between the National Perinatal Association, Patient Family Care, and Preemie Parent Alliance to provide an online NICU staff education course that is based off of the National Perinatal Association's recommendations for providing psychosocial support to NICU families. You can learn more about that at mynicunetwork.com. And Erica, if you could join us quickly and tell us, this is something totally out of the ordinary. We are actually having 2 webinars in the same month.
It's just nonstop celebration and sharing this month. No, we're really excited. But first I wanted to say again, Stacy, Janae, Jen, Deb, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It's always so lovely to hear from you, and so grateful for all the work that you're doing for families. And I mean, just across the spectrum, it means so much, and we're so grateful for that. But again, like Kira was saying, we're going to have another free webinar this month. So next Tuesday, a week from today, on May 15th, we're going to be celebrating International Kangaroo Care Awareness Day, which we're really excited about. We're trying something new. We're going to have a broadcast of a recording. It's going to be free to you all day long on Tuesday, May 15th. The first broadcast will be at noon, but after that, for about the next 48 hours, you'll be able to download and listen to that for free if you're an NPA or PPA member, or for $20 if you want to come and listen to it later or are not a member of either of our organizations. But this is going to be really great. I'm excited about our speaker. Dr. Raylene Phillips is a neonatologist. She's a parent. She's an advocate. And she is the head of the neuroprotective care unit at their NICU at Loma Linda University and their affiliated NICUs. She tells an incredible story about the power of the first hour of care in a baby's life, whether that baby is born in the NICU under special circumstances or delivered to the NICU under special circumstances, or has what we might consider a typical birth. She talks about how important that first hour of care, and then beyond that, the time that a baby and their caregivers are able to spend bonding with one another. So again, that is, something we all believe in very strongly about the parent as the primary care provider, but she's also going to present to us the evidence about parent as the most positive, consistent medical intervention that we can provide for infants in the first days of their life and as they continue to grow and heal and develop. So we really do hope that you will, one, join us as part of our organizations and find out more about what the Preemie Parent Alliance and the National Perinatal Association do, but also specifically join us to hear these talks and the other talks that we have archived and available for you on our websites, both the PPA website and the National Perinatal website. So thank you. We're so glad that you're here.
And that wraps it up for this last installment of, the latest installment of our webinar series. And we hope to see you next week. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for being with us.